Okay, so today we're going to try to wrap up Tom Wolfe's Man in Full. And what I want to do today is begin by talking a little bit about Stoicism. It's Wolfe's idea, as he makes pretty clear at the end of the book, that you will not understand Stoicism, nor will you appreciate it. Charlie and Conrad go out in America and they try to convince everyone to become Stoics, and they preach the religion of Zeus, and they are considered to be fools because the people around them don't understand. And so, because we might have a problem understanding Stoicism, I want to reiterate its essential characteristics. Stoicism is not selfishness, and Stoicism is not individualism. These are ruts in which our mind is often caught. The essential characteristic of Stoicism is independence. Wolfe's idea, and I think this is a very Stoic idea, is that some kind of independence is necessary for any kind of moral action. We can be enslaved neither to our bodies, nor to others, nor to opinion, nor to incentives if we are going to be free. We need to be independent of all those things. How much independence? That's a question. How much independence is necessary for social act or for moral action? I don't know the answer to that, or I'm not going to explore the answer to that. But every moral philosopher finds Stoicism attractive because the Stoics understand independence as a prerequisite to moral action. Perhaps it's also safe to say that every non-Stoic moral philosopher finds the Stoics a bit appalling, a bit difficult to take, a bit too extreme, because the Stoics take independence too far. But the reason Kant and Adam Smith and other great modern moral philosophers dwell on the Stoics is that they are right. That independence is necessary for moral action. So there is something, if you want to be a good person, there has to be something Stoic in you. And what the standard of Stoicism does in this book is reveal almost all the characters to be slaves to opinion, slaves to custom, slaves to their bodies, slaves to the view that the world has of them. And only the lens that Conrad provides gives us something outside of America from which to critique America. What we find a little bit disconcerting about Stoicism is that it takes independence so seriously. I'm not going to depend on other people for my happiness, and I'm not necessarily going to be helping people in need. My happiness will not depend on helping people in need. So the Stoic thinker says. And this is the importance, I believe, for Wolfe offering us in Conrad a Christianized Stoic. A Stoic who exercises manly independence, often helping those who are genuinely in need. The most prominent examples are the people that Conrad helps. Pocahontas in the prison and the old couple in Atlanta who is being extorted by a local gang. I might even go so far as to say that the only two acts of genuine charity in the book are those. I'll be going too far because we know Kenny helps out Conrad. There's other acts of charity. But the Stoic is the most charitable character in A Man in Full. That's why I'm calling it a Christianized charity. That's why it's important that Wolfe show us that Conrad is not a Christian, so that when the prison opens up during the earthquake, as it had opened up for Paul, he escapes, whereas Paul stayed. He's a Stoic, but that's the noun, not Christian. Okay, so I think this is a hard concept for us to understand, to wrap our minds around, and that's Wolfe's point. We live in a cave, and it is a cave that does not recognize Stoicism. He tries to introduce this shadow to us. Now, as I say, this is the perch from which he criticizes American society, and as we try to wrap up Wolfe's book, I want us to talk about three prominent aspects of American society that he analyzes from the Stoic perspective. Sex, race, and commerce. These are our topics for today. Sex, race, and commerce. And are there any other three topics in America besides football? Okay, so let us begin where it all begins, with sex. Now, Tom Wolfe wrote a book in the early 90s that contained an essay, and the essay was entitled "The Me Decade and the Third Great Awakening." The Me Decade, he was referring to the 1970s, where people finally became completely self-absorbed. Before that, they maintained old standards of propriety, or maybe only a few people were self-absorbed. But by the 1970s, everyone could own shag carpeting and buy their own love seat. And this he called the Third Great Awakening. The First Great Awakening, of course, happens in the 1730s, and it's the birth of evangelical Christian faith. The Second Great Awakening in the 1830s, 40s, connected with abolitionism, but also a rebirth of moral action and temperance, shaped by the Christian faith. The Third Great Awakening is the discovery of me, and that I'm going to live for me. The birth of individualism in America. As Wolfe writes in this essay, and I'm going to be quoting liberally from this essay for a second, individuals in America discovered and started doting on me. And this was especially true, first of all, of American women. American women, Wolfe writes in this particular essay, were liberated from the decreasing demands of housekeeping. The great prosperity of America after the World War finally redounded to liberating women from the need to wash, to cook, to garden, to slaughter, to milk, and to do all those daily things. The refrigerator, as I've said before, is the most decisive invention of the 20th century because it makes housework less onerous. And hence women are more free from the demands of the house. One of the great ads of the 1970s that Wolfe calls our attention to is an ad for Clairol. Is that how you say it? It's a hair thing. And the ad goes, "If I've only one life, let me live it as a blonde." And what this represents, according to Wolfe, is the elevation in the status of the ordinary woman or the housewife to the starring role in life's drama. All the world will analyze and agonize over these women. These women will draw cosmic conclusions from any event, and they will be taken seriously above all. Now, Wolfe does not judge this and doesn't say that it's bad, but he asks questions about it. And the question he asks is this: are women happier when there is more focus on their needs and desires? What is the nature of the happiness or power that women achieve by pursuing their own dreams? Do they compromise their influence over men and manners when they do this? As I say, Wolfe is not judging the feminist movement, but he is arguing that things turn out differently than the liberationists suggest for many women, if not most women. His number is for 9 out of 10 women. For every Angelina Jolie, is that a liberated woman? There are 9 miserable women. That's not his word. Let me talk about what that means. Wolfe's contention is that women's liberation leads to men's liberation. To the woman who says, "If I've only one life to live, let me live it as a blonde," the men respond. And they say, "If I've only one life to live, let me live it as Casanova or Henry VIII." Quote, "Instead of as a humdrum work-a-daddy, eternally faithful, except perhaps for a little skulking episode here and there, to a woman who now looks old enough to be my aunt and needs a shave, or else has electrolysis lines above her lip, as well as atrophied calves, and is an embarrassment to be seen with when you take her on vacation," end quote. Wolfe says men are inclined to, his word, shuck their overripe wives and take on fresh ones. And in the time, in olden days, wife shucking was a privilege of the rich, the Henry VIII, the Casanova, the powerful and the celebrated. But in the me decade, it becomes the normal behavior, one of the factors that has pushed the divorce rate to 50%, end quote. It's also true, although Wolfe doesn't say this in this particular essay, that many marriages will simply fail to form. Why marry when you can get the benefits without it? But the ultimate point, and this is the point I'm trying to make with this essay, is that under the old way, marriage and the home was seen as a haven in a heartless world, a refuge from individualism, a place where people lived together, shared together, became one in love. No longer. The family is just as much defined by the narcissism of America as any other institution, which means that it is extraordinarily unsafe and not the source for happiness that it once was. The me decade was bad for love, and it was bad for marriage, though it was great for sex. So Wolfe is saying this: America is the me country, and Stoicism is the remedy. So let's talk about what it means to say America is the me country from the novel Man in Full. I think we can do that. And the best person to look at when we do this is, of course, Charlie, one of the main characters. For those with a favored numbering, 227. As Charlie reflects on his life and his decision to leave his wife, his decision to build the Croker Concourse, he says, this is on the middle of page 227, for those with the favored numbering, he was afraid. That was the word. Since he believed that his performance as a developer, as an entrepreneur, as a plunger, as a creative person, was bound up with his sexual vitality, then he also believed that if he ever lost that is his sexual vitality, he would lose his power in business and everything else. And now he was afraid that the pressure had rendered him exactly that: impotent. We have pills for that now. He could sense it, he could feel it, somehow he knew it. So for Charlie, success in business seems to be wrapped up with his sexual vitality. This is the way he understands himself. But you have to ask yourself the question, aren't you forced to ask yourself the question, is this true? Was his success in business connected with his sexual vitality? And the obvious answer is no. When was he successful in business? When he was married to Martha, the woman whose shoulders looked like the linebacker from a Dallas Cowboys. And in fact, Martha gives quite a stirring account of the times when they were successful in business just a few pages before this. On page, I have 220. There's a long discussion of this when she's taught after she has worked out with her friend. Her voice becomes heated on the bottom of 220, and she says, how could she help it? There was more to the whole thing than just her career as a business partner, a co-developer, an indispensable counselor to the man now known as the rugged individualist Charlie Croker. There was much more. She couldn't very well tell Joyce about that either. There was love. But how could she possibly find the words to describe it? Success, euphoria, ecstasy, love. She and Charlie had been a pair of young, beautiful, bright, strong creatures. The night that Charlie had closed the deal with Harris, Bledsoe, and Fee to come to the Peachtree building as anchor tenants, which meant that the project would become a reality, the building would at last be built, it was she, Martha, personally had introduced Charlie to the law firm's general partner, Harry Bledsoe. And she and Amanda Bledsoe, his daughter, had gone to the Sweetbriar together, and that night she goes on and on and on. And as she ends the paragraph, it was love absolute. And for the time, there were no two happier people on the face of the earth. Charlie's vitality doesn't come, or I should say his business acumen, his business success, comes not from sexual vitality, but from having a stable, loving home. Though he doesn't understand that. He's infected with the narcissism of the me generation, who focuses all on sexual urgency and vitality. And are we not to see Martha as one of the great victims of that misunderstanding. But Martha stands for a lot more than Martha. Martha stands for, and I mean this with a very big smile in my heart, every big woman. That is, every woman who's birthed many children. Martha discusses this, that is her fate, even before she discusses the love that she had for Charlie, on page 212, same chapter. There was a kind of life that Martha was living that was no longer possible for a woman to live. And she calls it the life of a matron. You want to get slapped? Call your wife a matron. Here's what she has to say about being a matron. In that moment, all the cumbersome psychological baggage a woman loads upon herself during a divorce fell away. She was 53 years old, for God's sake. She had been married to Charlie Croker for 29 years, and she had borne him 3 children, and she had helped him get started in his glorious career of which he was so obscenely proud. She had every right to be what her own mother had been at the age of 53. A matron. Yes, a matron. A queen. Immovably secure in her family and in society. If a matron wanted to help herself to a nice, comfortable coating of tissue, she had nothing to worry about, nothing at all. It had merely lent her mother gravity. So this is one of the casualties of the meanness of the United States. American meanness kills the matron. What is the matron? It's a devoted mother. Why go to the gym? Let me make sure that there is dinner on the table. My children need me. My husband needs me. My husband loves me, and I love them. And I'm safe in this haven in a heartless world. There is an episode in one of Wolfe's other books that illustrates the same point. This was maybe his second novel. His first novel was The Right Stuff, about astronauts and manliness, which is an interesting book, and also made into, I think, a good movie. But I can't remember who's in it. Bonfire of the Vanities was also made into a movie, and someone can check this out. But I think it's horrible. And the book was written in the late 80s, and it's about Wall Street. And the protagonist in the book, Sherman McCoy. Charlie is in this book, actually. Sherman McCoy is a bigwig on Wall Street and has the same temptations that Charlie has, and also goes out and has affairs and loses his wife, ultimately robs a bank, he gets put in jail, it's quite sad. But he goes to a party in Park Avenue and surveys the women there. This is on page 347 of Bonfire of the Vanities. And here's what Sherman says as he's surveying the women at the party. What was entirely missing from the party was that manner of woman who was neither very young nor very old, who was laid in the lining of subcutaneous fat, who grows with plumpness and a rosy face that speaks without a word of home and hearth and hot food, ready at 6 and 7 stories read aloud at night, and conversations while seated at the edge of the bed, just where the Sandman comes. In short, no one had invited mother. So the casualty of the sexual revolution, or the me generation, as Wolfe portrays it, is love and marriage, as signified by the mother or the matron. And what we get instead is boys with breasts a very interesting, and I think actually quite important, understanding of what feminine beauty is. I'm sure we've all seen portraits of this, and people use these in sociology classes and other pseudosciences that we have in the modern world. They'll show a portrait of a woman from the 1500s, and she will be pleasantly plump. And they will say, well, this is the portrait of female beauty that the Italians had. And then we could look at the portrait of beauty now. I think we'd have to say Beyonce apparently is the portrait of feminine beauty today. And while not as slender as perhaps a reputation would have her be, less pleasingly plump, fit, defined, kind of a boy with breasts. Are we all right with this? And the conclusion that sociologists would draw from this is that beauty is entirely arbitrary. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and our beholding is shaped by our society somehow or other. Wolfe, while I think he agrees with that, is making a comment about the meaning of beauty for human life. If boys with breasts is our ideal of human beauty, then our ideal of human action is sex. Why do we like boys with breasts? Men, I ask you this question, don't answer. I'll answer for you. I don't know exactly how I can say it, though, without invoking Marvin Gaye. Right? Boys with breasts are interesting because they could be compatible sexual partners. How's that? That's another way of saying, let's get it on. Let's get it on. That's Marvin Gaye. Whereas the portrait of feminine beauty that the Italians have, the one where the woman can have a little layer of fat, suggests that we appreciate women for something besides sex, or perhaps even in addition to sex. That is, we appreciate them for what they make possible in our lives. Every kind of success. The boy with breasts is a sex object. That's the point. I can have a little editorial comment here. Story time is here again. Let's gather around. My children play basketball. I am at the YMCA, and at the YMCA they have Zumba classes. Have you ever seen Zumba? Zumba? Zumba. So yes, you've heard of this. And there, at the various times my child has Zumba basketball practice, there are different clientele for Zumba classes. So Thursday night is hot young lady night at Zumba. And they're dancing and, anyways. I always say to the other guys, this is why we have laws censoring things, or we should maybe have different gyms. Because it's hard to work out while that's going on. Saturday morning, 8 to 10, my child has basketball practice, and it's old lady Zumba. That's sad. And here's all I mean by that. I think exercise is great, and I'm very much for exercising. Not because I think I want to look young, but rather I would just like to delay my decrepitude a little bit. And that's the way I advise my wife. You don't need to get fit as far as I'm concerned. Just be able to walk. That's what I want to do. Let's walk till we're 80. And so that might require occasionally stretching. All right, that's all I have. But there's nothing worse than old ladies doing Zumba and trying to look sultry doing it, which is often what you get. Be a matron, as Martha imagined, as befitting your age and your body type. So I'm just trying to make the following point on sex for Wolfe. I mean, I think, and the reason I bring up the boys with breasts thing is I think this is very comprehensive. That is, the elevation of the individual has shaped everything. It has shaped how we experience family life, or even whether we will experience family life. If you get married, you got to worry about him leaving. The same factor this individualism of American life, has affected how we perceive beauty and changed our idea of what is beautiful. That same idea has made certain ways of life much more difficult to entertain and live. Not only because of the dangers that it implies, but also because of the social, I don't want to say stigma, but the social ideals that it violates. How can Stoicism fix this problem? As I say, I think the argument that Tom Wolfe was making in each of these cases is that America is a me country and Stoicism is part of the remedy. How can Stoicism help remedy this problem? The answer is, in a way, obvious. Stoicism de-emphasizes the role that sex plays in a good life. For sex, we are dependent on another person. Stoicism teaches the importance of independence, of not giving in when you see in the apartment next to you an inviting girl whose mother calls her little slut, as happens in this novel. Conrad doesn't go over and knock and say, hey, I'm looking for some action. Conrad doesn't give in. He resists. He's a Stoic. And that lays the foundation for any kind of enduring relationship. Without that, however, there's no enduring relationships. You get the serial wives that almost every character in this book manifests. Our second topic in this book is race. Now, I think Wolfe is saying many things, and I'm not asking anyone to do what I'm about to say, but if you compare race as it appears in Bonfire of the Vanities and race as it appears in A Man in Full, you see that Wolfe thinks certain things about the development of America on race. One of them is that the old generation is much more taken with ideas of race than the young generation. You can see this in A Man in Full, I think, just looking at the differences in the generations. Both Serena and Wally and Elizabeth Armholster, in different ways, are willing to mingle with blacks. They're all roughly from the same generation. They're all appalled in different ways by Charlie or Inman Armholster's actions. Obviously, Elizabeth is willing, I think, to go all the way in showing that she's willing to mix the races. But the older generation is almost overtly believers in racial superiority, are obsessed with the idea. Charlie, Inman, and all those guys. Inman can only imagine that his daughter was brainwashed by the liberals at the university into going up to Farouk's room. Whereas I think Elizabeth wasn't brainwashed. Or I should say, she was brainwashed, but that wasn't the brainwashing. For the nature of her brainwashing, see the first section today on sex. We don't need to get into it. So I think Wolfe is showing that race is less of a factor in the way people look at each other than it has been. And I also think that the teaching of the novel is supposed to illuminate the wisdom of Booker T. Washington. That is, in my judgment, although I'm willing to be corrected on this, Roger Too White is the racial hero of the book. The mayor's a close second. And the reason Roger Too White is a hero is that he is the second most stoical character in the book. So who is Roger Too White? Roger Too White is introduced to us in a very strange context in the book. He's driving through Atlanta and gets stuck in the middle of a celebration called Freaknik. And we are introduced to his thoughts on that, and hence his thoughts on life in general. And we are told that he is an admirer of Booker T. Washington. And the philosophy of Booker T. Washington is, if you think about it, very much consistent with the idea of stoical independence. The central tenet of Booker T. Washington's thought is this: we can only achieve racial equality through black self-perfection. We can only achieve racial equality through black self-perfection. Booker T teaches, don't worry about what the white man thinks about you. Worry about making yourself better. Make yourself successful and better, and he will have to respect you. But you're not doing this in order to get white respect. You become successful, you become better,